Hello and welcome. And today I'm going to be talking about how to manage your anti-immune system with a whole food plant-based diet. And I'm joined by Karen Lee, who's a nutritionist, but was a former intensive care nurse who was given a diagnosis of MS back in 2016. She's just written a book called Healing from Inside Out. And let me just share the look of the book, which I must say is a lovely book. She also shares her knowledge through her website, The Sensitive Foodie Kitchen. So, welcome, Karen.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
So, I know I've given a little bit of background about yourself, that you've obviously have a diagnosis of MS, but you were a nurse. Um, please add a bit more about the nutritionist bit, because I think that's obviously key and very important to this.
Yes. So I started to study nutrition whilst I was still nursing, beginning of sort of 2010, 2011, that side. And I'd always been interested in food and the connection between food and health. But at that time, I was getting lots of really bad headaches, and I discovered some food intolerances, which was to dairy and yeast, which meant that I couldn't eat my favorite foods. That was like cake, bread, cheese, couldn't drink wine. And I basically started to study nutrition to find out how I could overcome these food intolerances so I could drink wine again. It was as shallow as that. And in doing this studying, it just melded so well with the knowledge that I had from nursing. Because when you work in intensive care, you learn a lot about the human body. Obviously, we had to study to quite a high level as well, and the just things just all clicked together as a way of supporting the body to, first of all, to heal, but also then to live well. So that's how that journey started.
Gosh, yeah. And I suppose with intensive care, quite often people are unable to actually talk to you or communicate with you, which is why it is imperative you can understand a lot very quickly.
Yes, I mean, like I say, the human body is just such an incredible machine, essentially, and it's so complex. And once we start to, once one system, if you like, it needs some support from whatever we needed to do, whether or not that was to supporting their blood pressure, to supporting them breathing. When we've got people sedated, obviously, we need to keep them safe. We need to make sure that they're well. And I soon realized that whereas we look at all these systems separately, they're all connected. Everything is connected in the body. And when one element starts going skew with, then it has this impact on all of the others as well. So, and we are meant to live well. We're programmed to survive. We have these quite stringent parameters within all of these systems, which makes the body work efficiently and effectively, and it works really hard to maintain those parameters as well. So whilst we just go about our daily life, there are so many different cycles and cascades that involving lots of tiny nutrients and cofactors and enzymes, and everything is working really hard. And I soon came to understand the fact that when we are not looking after it through providing it the right fuel and the right nutrients for the food that we eat, but also if we're not moving our bodies and when we're under a lot of stress, then just makes our bodies work even harder. And then we need even more of these tiny beneficial nutrients in order to deal with all of the leftovers of all of these chemical reactions that are going on. And it's very easy to get stuck in this cycle, and you end up with a lot of these inflammatory compounds basically circulating in your body, and that's where this low grade inflammation comes from, that is underlies all chronic health problems, not just autoimmune disease. I mean, that's my focus now, but a lot of the chronic health problems that we see today, things like diabetes and obesity and high blood pressure and dementia, they all have this same common theme of this low-grade inflammation, which comes about from our bodies working really, really hard to stay within the comfortable parameters it needs to function properly.
Absolutely. And so today we're obviously going to concentrate on the autoimmune diseases, which is what we were speaking about earlier, stretch,
Mm.
such a wide range. I think, well, I have psoriasis, so I have an autoimmune, and I think in your book you quote that 10% of the population actually have some form, and it ranges from, the obvious ones that we think of is like IBD and celiac type of diseases all the way through to, and as I said to you, MS. I didn't sort of dawn on me that MS actually was an autoimmune thing because, most people heard of multiple sclerosis. It's such a strong, in the UK, for example, it's got a very strong charities behind it, really pushing it hard
Mm.
in for people to look after themselves with MS. So looking, going back to what you were saying as to where we start to look after ourselves, one of the biggest thing, and which is what you start the book off really, is talking about gut health.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. It's absolutely key. And so 70% of the immune system is actually found in and around the gut. And this is again, it's something we don't tend to think about, but as we develop as a fetus, so all these tissues and all these cells are reproducing early on in the mother's uterus, is that this, as the tissues form, they fold over, and then this long tube is formed. So it's one of the gastrointestinal tract is one of the first structures that's formed, and it's a barrier in a similar way to our skin that separates the outside world from the inside world. But obviously, when you think about the gut, we can't see it. So we don't know, we can't see with our eyes what's going on with it and when it gets damaged, unlike our skin. And so it's a really important protective layer. And obviously, there's lots of different functions as we go down. And in the small intestine, which is where majority of our food, once it's been broken down, all of these compounds. So we're looking at amino acids from proteins and the sugars from the carbohydrates and the fatty acids, as well as all of the minerals and the vitamins and the phytonutrients. They get absorbed mostly in the small intestine just before you get to the start of the large intestine, which is the colon. And this is where our microbiome lives. And this is the colony of millions upon millions of microbes. So mainly bacteria, but there's also viruses and fungi and all sorts of what's the word I'm trying to think of? Microbes living in there, and they have this relationship with us. So this is their home. So they work really hard to make their home a nice place to be, and it's about getting a really good balance between the types of microbes that are in there. And they thrive on the type of fibre that's found in all of plant foods that we can't digest. So this unfermentable fibre, or an indigestible fibre that is fermentable, and that's what they then break down, and they turn these into other compounds that they can consume. So this is their food, and so that is what helps our microbiome thrive. And there's so many things that the microbiome does for us. And some of the tasks have kind of been outsourced, so they make a lot of basis of some of the hormones, some of the transmitters of information. So we keep hearing about GPL1, which is used for these obesity jabs, but that's one of the compounds that microbiome actually makes. So it makes this messenger to tell the brain, actually, you've had enough to eat. So it does a lot. But on top of that, it creates these short-term chain fatty acids. So these are really, really short little compounds that send messages throughout the body. So they help to reduce inflammation. They send messages to the brain, everything's well, so they are so important. And so this whole sort of within our microbiome, they just help us to stay well. And one of the problems that we've got in the current Western diet is that it's so low in fibre that essentially the microbiome is being starved. We also kill it off with excess amount of antibiotics, for example. Now, antibiotics are absolute lifesavers, and if we need to have them, we need to have them. However, they historically have been given out when they're not necessary, but also they are often fed to animals. So you get these residues in meat, which is in tiny amounts, but it still kind of builds up over time. And this then has this negative effect. But also things like smoking, environmental toxins, infectious food. There's all sorts of stuff, basically, that can have this negative effect on the microbiome. And you can end up in this overgrowth of the bad bacteria. They're quite hardy, and they're more pathogenic, so they will trigger inflammation as well. Whereas the beneficial bacteria, they're a little bit more flaky, so they die off quite easily if either they're not fed or can be impacted by these negative aspects. And so and if we're not providing the microbiome with the right type of food, it will then start to nibble away and eat this protective layer on the inside of the gut called the mucin layer, which is a bit gloopy. And that then, if they break through that, then that barrier is lost between the gut lining, which is quite thin because it needs to be, because the food, and nutrients and everything needs to get into it. And this then starts to trigger the immune system and the immune cells that are in and around the gut. So, you can see there's lots of things going on. And they're all things that so easily we come across in our everyday life, so, and because we can't see what's going on, it's often quite a long way down the line before we realize that there's a problem.
Yeah, and I think also your body's trying so hard to neutralize a lot of the foods and to make sure that it's okay, that it can take a while. So you can, which I assume, which is why for some people they can get away with a few foods of some similar type and it's okay, but they just overload it a bit too much and then they start to have the issues.
Yes, and the thing is with autoimmune disease, but also any chronic health condition, again, it's never just one thing. You can have something that might set things off, but things would have been building up over time. So and some people, it's not a problem at all. And this is because there is a genetic element with autoimmune conditions, and that varies. So like for MS, for example, they've discovered over 200 different types of genes. So it's not just one gene, but if you carry those genes, the other risk is 75% environmental. So by that, it's the food, it's medications, it's the environment, what toxins you're exposed to, what your stress is like, how much you exercise, if you've got low, enough vitamin D, there's loads and loads of different influences. And at some point, everything comes together and there'll be one last thing that kind of triggers this. For me, I caught flu off a patient. There was a particular bad type of flu going around, and it's always a risk when you're looking after patients like that. You can't get away from them. And I was really poorly for a good month. And then a month after that, that's when my optic neuritis kicked in. And but it was the pain in my eye, although it was really bad this time, it was a very familiar pain. So looking back, I can see that it was brewing for some time, but I hadn't really thought about it. And
But I
so,
think, sorry, I was just going to
oh,
say, I mean, that's a sign of looking after your body and listening to your body, because your body
yeah.
is so clever and it does try to tell you things. I mean, and everything that you've just explained about the gut health, which is, I think, is really important to understand, because your book isn't just about here's a whole load of recipes, just go and eat these good foods. It
Mm,
explains why. And I think if you understand why, it makes you reason and to understand yourself what is a good food and a bad food. And clearly, everybody has different reactions because
mhm,
there's so many different genes, as we were talking about, and
yeah,
everybody's microbiome is different. And the example you give in your book is, you've got two twins who can be exactly the same in so many genetic features, but have a completely different microbiome. Is amazing, really.
absolutely.
And which
Yeah.
then shows, and that would show if, for example, if they're putting on weight, one puts on weight, one doesn't, and how you
Mm.
feel. So going back to inflammatory foods, which are the trigger things, what sort of foods would you call the inflammatory types?
Yeah. Okay, well, first of all, any food that doesn't doesn't include fiber. So as I say, fiber is really important for feeding the microbiome as well as looking after the general gut health anyway, because it helps move all this undigested food and byproducts of digestion and all sorts of nasty compounds that we want to get out, basically. So fiber not only is like nature's Brillo pad, and it pushes things along, but also then it's feeding the microbiome. So and a lot of foods today that people are eating are packed with excess salt. So again, too much salt, it affects osmosis and the homeostasis within the body. To excess sugar, now that's added sugar. And you only have to pick up a packet and look at the ingredients, and there's such a long list of ingredients. And some foods, which even aren't supposed to be sweet, may still have like 5 different types of refined sugar in it. So sugar and salt, excess sugar and salt are bad. And then we're looking at things like meat, for example. And so meat, no fiber whatsoever, and it contains a high amount of heme iron, which is readily absorbable into the body. So, and this is an argument that people often say, well, we need to eat meat, otherwise we're going to become anemic. And obviously, meat has iron in it, and we can absorb that really easily. And iron is essential. We know that, without it becoming anemic, and then we get low blood oxygen levels, and it causes lots of problems. However, because iron is so important, and as we evolved, it was obviously a nutrient that was hard to get hold of. Our body doesn't have a way of expelling it. So basically, you either use it for whatever reactions you need in the body, or then it stores it. But too much stored heme iron is actually really inflammatory in the body. So when you've got someone who's eating a really high meat diet, and very, that can be a real problem. So that can be quite an inflammatory factor for a lot of people. But there's also other things like other inflammatory compounds in these foods. Plus, even when you cook it, you don't get rid of all of the bacteria and things like that. So there's other things in there that can have a negative impact on the microbiome. So there's certain bacteria that we don't want to hang around, and
Yeah.
if they get established in the microbiome, then they will take over, and you get this imbalance again. And then dairy is also another problem, and that is quite common in autoimmune disease. For it's very difficult to find a direct cause, in the research, but a lot of people react to dairy anyway. I mean, 70% of the world's population is intolerant to it. Um, and if we kind of look at it, we're not baby cows. We really don't need the fluid from another animal, and often that's something that the immune system really struggles to learn to deal with it, which is why you can get this molecular mimicry. So with autoimmune disease, basically what happens is the immune system gets confused, gets overwhelmed, and then it identifies usually a protein in the cells of some part of the body that decides it's non-self, and so it starts attacking it. And it's often quite similar to a compound in a protein in food. So, for example, with celiac disease, which is the clearest one you can, to show, is gluten. So the protein, it's a protein. The immune system has got confused with a similar protein actually in the gut lining, and it starts to attack that instead of the gluten, which it's saying is not right for that person. So that's, and this is what can happen with a lot of foods, that it's so easy once you've got a bit of a leaky gut and these partially digested proteins sneak through into the blood, that will set off the immune system again, saying, oh, this isn't right, we need to get rid of this. Hopefully it will identify it correctly and it will deal with it correctly, but it gets confused.
So there's a lot of things that, when you look at diets, particularly the whole food plant-based things, we start off what you can't eat and you think, oh my goodness, that's it. What on earth is there left for me to eat?
Yeah.
However, you make it, I love the way that you've laid it out and you show everything that you can eat and you go, gosh, I eat a lot of those already. And it's just about managing it. So it's also, tell me the main groups of food that, that you think are easy for people to start adopting straight away.
Yeah. Well, the easiest thing to start with is to eat more fruits and vegetables, basically. And it still amazes me that only 29% of the UK population actually hits a 5 a day target. And that is actually something that's celebrated. And it's just like, well, hang on a second, there's over 60% who are not. And some people will have one a week. And the important things about fruits and vegetables, apart from the fact that they taste lovely and there is so many to choose from, there's so many different flavors and textures, is that they, as well as the fibre and they contain lots of vitamins, but also all of these different colours contain these really powerful phytonutrients, which are these amazing anti-inflammatory compounds that can help calm down this systemic inflammation, as well as acting as cofactors within the body for various different processes as well. So the colours is where the magic comes in. And I was always telling people, just eat a rainbow every day, so as long as you're getting some purples in there, so it might be blackberries or blueberries, you're getting greens, might be having some spinach, but also some broccoli. And indeed, some groups, like the broccoli, is in the cruciferous vegetable family, which is really large. And these can contain even more wonderful anti-inflammatory compounds, that do different things. So that's the easiest place to start, is just eat more fruits and vegetables. And it might be that you have two extras on your plate in the evening, or you have a salad at lunchtime as well, or you make some soup. There's lots of really easy ways. Then it's about looking at your grains. So like I say, some people with autoimmune disease really need to avoid gluten. And what I've done with the recipes is I've made sure that they are all gluten-free and they work with gluten-free alternatives. That is, so it starts off as that. Now, just as a little twist in the normal recipes, you can also make them with whole grain flour if you wish, but they definitely all work with gluten-free. And it's about eating whole grains. So you can have quinoa and millet and chickpea flour, which is just ground down chickpeas. A lot of gluten-free products that you buy in the shops is full of chemicals and compounds and things that are going to glue it together, which I really don't advise doing. So it's actually eating natural whole foods. So on the grain side of things. And then it's about eating beans and legumes. Now, a lot of people, they're like, oh, I can't eat that, and yeah, it's, if you've got a real bad balance, this overgrowth of these pathogenic bacteria in your gut, if you suddenly give them a load of fermentable fibre, they are going to have a party. There is going to be serious gas going on because gas is a byproduct of the fermentation. And so if you suddenly do this overnight, then it's not going to work for you. It's going to be painful, it's going to be bloated, and you don't have to do that. So it's about introducing them gradually and seeing how you react and giving your body a chance to get used to them, your microbiome to change. The turnover of generations in our 24 hours, I've seen different figures from between 5 and 50 different generations in 24 hours. So basically, the balance can change quickly, which is good. So beans and legumes, they contain plant-based proteins, lots of minerals, but also lots of this lovely fibre as well. So, and then the other family or the other group to include is nuts and seeds. And this is really important because they contain healthy fats. And a lot of the oils that are used in food, and in cooking are really highly refined, and they've gone through this chemical process so that you really just end up with the fat. But so when you have sunflower oil, for example, all you're getting in there is the fat from the sunflower seeds. When you eat sunflower seeds, you're getting less fat, but you're getting lots of healthy fats in there. But you're also getting protein and some minerals and fiber as well. So when you eat them in their whole form, they're giving you lots of other benefits as well. And these healthy fats are so important because just going back to the foods to avoid, saturated fat is not ideal for our body, full stop, but it's particularly bad for gut health as well, especially fried foods, deep fried foods. And, when these oils have been heated at a really high level, because they then create these other compounds, toxic compounds, which then just continue to fuel that inflammation.
I thought that was really interesting reading in your book about fats and how it works and the burning point. And your tip is actually use water because,
Yes.
Water disappears at 100 degrees anyway. And
Yes.
it's a safe way to do it. And I think also, changing diet does take a while because your taste buds change. So, and I think that you find that the foods that you mentioned, after a while, if you've cut out particularly the ultra processed food, ACA, sugar, once you've got rid of a lot of sugar, even if you've just cut down a bit on the sugar, your taste buds start coming back and you can really start to taste the different flavors in foods and realize you don't need to have sugar. And when you do eat something with sugar in it, you can think, oh God, all I can taste is sugar. I can't actually taste what I'm eating.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the flavors are incredible. And I think it's about 28 days for your taste buds to turn over. And it's the same with salt as well. So it's So with some foods, a tiny little bit added in will just lift the flavor. But yeah, when you suddenly sort of at first it tastes quite bland, but then you start getting those flavors back. And then when you have something that's really salty, it's just like, oh, can't bear it. The
Yeah.
same with oils as well. So if I might have a chip or something, and right afterwards, my tongue, the taste, the texture of my tongue is horrible. And then I think, oh yeah, no, I don't. And it only takes one, I might just, oh, I really fancy your chip. I might just nick one. And then I think, no, what am I doing that for? Because it's actually horrible.
Yeah,
um,
it's strange, isn't it? How it does,
mm,
and all of this actually, all it does is to help you. So I was going to say stick on on the right path, but it's true. It is sticking on the right path is about nourishing your body
yes.
and
Yeah.
how important it is. And I think your book is great in how it just takes you through those parts to understand how your body works. Starting with your gut, talking about fiber, how fiber works, how we need to have fiber, how important it is, and how we
Mm,
get the sugar from the fiber as well. That I found
yeah.
that really interesting. And then obviously you guide people to start their journey, which I think can be very daunting.
Yeah.
And one of the things I said to you earlier is once I started looking at your recipes, I was really pleased to see there was a lot of puddings included. So I thought, oh yeah, this could be something for me for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, food to some people is just functional, as in they just eat because they know they have to. But food is there's so much connected to it. Yes, it has a functional purpose, but it's enjoyable, and it's social, and there's a lot of cultures and experiences around food, and when you have a diagnosis of an autoimmune disease, that you've got that condition, that you've got that for the rest of your life. However, that doesn't mean that it's going to play a huge role once it's all under control. It doesn't need to diminish your life as such. um but so eating in a way that is sustainable, that you can carry on doing that you continue to nourish your body for the rest of your life, is so important. And diets and some programs, they are so limited and they're so strict and they are boring, to be honest with you. And I get a lot of pleasure out of food. So if I couldn't have cake, I'd be really sad because, I love it. And so it's just finding ways to still really enjoy food and to be able to share it with other people and that they enjoy it as well, because you don't want to end up having to cook, three different meals, or you're always out on the edge. So, and it doesn't have to be complicated. That's the other thing. So a lot of my recipes I try to make as quite as quick as possible, and
Yeah.
because fatigue is such a big problem for people with autoimmune disease, and getting the energy up to cook is sometimes too much. So you need to have things that you're not going to be slaving over a stove for hours on end.
Absolutely. And I think that's really important because, we're talking about how we're looking after ourselves.
Mm,
But, a lot of yours is very much based around the fact is that you have a condition that does
mm,
need managing. And, the evidence is out there 200-fold that what you've put into your body has a direct impact on that condition.
yeah,
Even,
yeah,
autoimmune plus all the other ones as well. So
yeah.
anyway, so thank you so much for joining us. It was, it's a real pleasure to, listen to someone who's so enthusiastic about food and understands directly the impact it has on their body. And I think that's really telling.
Oh, my pleasure. You could probably tell I could talk about it for hours.
Thank you so much.